short while ago, after a harrowing 2 weeks trying to get home from France during the COVID madness, I found myself under strict house arrest, and so had much time in my hands to get to those projects you want to do but never get to. One such project was to scan my collection of film images from over 30 years of shooting ad campaigns. Now that's a lot of films, and so I wasn't going to digitize every single film, just the interesting ones. You know, let the proverbial can of beans against white fade into oblivion. Even at that, this would be a monumental task, especially if the films were scanned with my old but pretty good 4870 Epson scanner, which I initially thought would be perfect for the task since it's capable of scanning film at high resolutions. Most of the images I wanted to digitize were recorded on 4x5-inch positive transparency film. That's slide film, which is a pretty big original. And so I chose a moderately high scanner resolution setting of 2400 pixels per inch at 4x5 inches. This creates a whopping 9600 by 12,000 pixel 16-bit file. That's a 659 megabyte flattened TIFF file. By the way, I'm using 4x5-inch film in this tutorial, but all is the same whether you use 35mm medium format or any other film format. Notice I said pixels per inch and not dots per inch. A digitized image is made up of pixels, not dots. Dots are used to construct printed images, and roughly speaking, one printing dot is created from 4 image pixels. Unfortunately, 2400 pixels per inch created a big problem. It takes a lot of time to create a high-bit scan of a 4x5-inch sheet of film. How much time? In the case of my Epson, about 10 minutes. At this rate, I'd have to ask the government to extend my incarceration for a whole year, or maybe even 2. When I say high bit, I mean 16 bits per channel rather than low bit at 8 bits per channel. High bit gives me 16 bits for the red channel, 16 for the green channel, and another 16 for the blue channel, for a total of 48-bit, allowing for greater extremes for finessing color and tone during processing and editing. So why is the Epson so slow? It's slow because it scans the image with a linear array. A linear array is made up of 3 rows of sensors that slowly move down the film, digitizing the image one line at a time. The first row captures red, the second green, and the third blue. This is pretty cool technology, but it's way too slow for the amount of film I want to digitize. But then I came up with a brilliant idea. Why not use my 61 megapixel digital camera to take advantage of its area array imaging sensor, which would allow me to sample the whole surface of the film in a single instant. An area array means that the imaging chip has both horizontal as well as vertical rows of sensor sites, effectively covering its whole surface area rather than just one measly line. With the exception of the Sigma camera, which is fitted with a Foveon X3 3-layer imaging sensor, there is a disadvantage to area array systems. The disadvantage is that when an area array camera captures an image in the usual way, which is captured in just one exposure through a red, green, blue, checkered Bayer filter fitted over the sensor, it captures monochromatic data only. And so to create color, the color has to be interpolated after the fact from the Bayer filter influence monochromatic data. On the other hand, my scanner can capture true color. True color because each point of the film is scanned for red, green, and blue independently. Therefore, or at least in theory, should capture color more accurately. But if you're willing to spend a little more time, you could set the camera to capture true color using 4-shot mode, if your camera has such a feature. This creates one exposure for each channel, red, green, blue, plus an extra green for luminance. If you require ridiculously high resolution, then you could shoot in 16-shot mode, providing your camera supports this feature, which does the 4 shots 4 times, each time moving the sensor a pixel or so to capture more pixels for extreme resolution with true color. In the interest of speed, I determined that shooting one-shot mode was more than adequate for my needs. To economize on time for this project, I set up my film digitizing factory to be as fast and efficient as possible, as well as comfortable to work with. To this end, I started with a sturdy tripod. A tripod really speeds up this production since you only have to compose and focus one time on the first film. Nothing changes but the films, which are positioned in the same spot each time. Optics are critical for a sharp reproduction, so I chose a lens that would capture the sharpest image possible when placed really close to the film. In my arsenal of lenses, this 180mm is my best choice. It is a macro lens and so is designed to be sharp when shooting in close. On this setup, it'll be about 74 centimeters from the film. In the interest of sharpness, I will also shoot at the lens sharp point, which is f11. If you don't have a macro or close-up lens, you can use close-up filters, but they do not render as sharp an image as a macro lens. I like using longer focal length lenses so that the whole camera rig sits a comfortable distance away from the film. This allows me more room when climbing in there to swap out film without bumping the camera. To hold the images in place in front of my camera rig, I like to use my old Bessler film holder from my enlarger left over from my darkroom days. I could have used the plastic film holder from my scanner or made a do-it-yourself frame from a piece of heavy cardstock with the 4x5-inch rectangle cut out of its center. But I felt that the Bessler was better since it is made of rigid steel. This film holder was clamped to a boom arm on a light stand. This clamp was attached to the holder's outer rim just below the hinge so that the handles were positioned at the top of the assembly and the hinge at the bottom. With this orientation, I can easily open the holder without removing it from the stand to swap out films. To back illuminate the film image, a small softbox was placed behind the film. Its placement needs to be far enough away from the back of the film so that its front white nylon surface is out of the camera's depth of field. Otherwise, any folds or imperfections on the white fabric might record as weird tones running through parts of the image. You'll notice that I have placed it further away than necessary. This allows lots of room around the film holder to make swapping out films easier. With the camera, subject, film holder, and light source in place, I fine-tune the camera and the tripod's position to the holder. Then looking through the viewfinder, I adjust the camera's orientation to square it to the opening in the film holder where the film will sit. Since I won't reframe each new film when put in the holder, I spent a little more time making sure the camera is square on to the opening as possible. I'm photographing a lot of film images and so need to minimize corrections in post. To this end, I need to make sure that the area of the softbox that will be seen through the opening is evenly illuminated. Most softboxes have brighter and darker areas, so I need to make sure that I have the box positioned so that my camera sees the most evenly lit area of the source's white nylon front. Otherwise, exposure will vary a little across the surface of the film in the digital capture. A quick test shot is taken to check out evenness. With the image ported over to my computer via tethered capture, a quick look is taken to see how even the image is. Exposure is not too important at this point as long as I haven't burned it out. I notice that the left side has a darker portion, and so I must move the softbox to the right a little to lose this darker area, then shoot another test. Back at the computer, the resulting image looks much better, especially if we compare it to the previous image. Keep in mind that you'll never get it perfect. You just want to make sure that the tonal variations are not too pronounced. I got lucky on this second try, but often you may have to move the box around a few times to get the best. Typically, lenses record images a little darker towards the edges, so be aware of that too when judging your tests. You can minimize this by selecting the correct lens profile in your raw processing software. If instead you're scanning your images, exposure variation will probably not be an issue. I checked a scan from my scanner taken without any film in place and found that it was even from edge to edge.